So one of the questions I have for you is, what's your final goal? Do you only want to do basic operations, or would you also like to go into image analysis? I mean, again, when it comes to image analysis, I would ideally prefer doing that uh, when I have some of your data versus me just showing that to you on some random data. You won't feel very personal about it. So if
Hmm.
that's where you want to go in future, I would say let's just still stick to basic operations at the moment. I can show you a few of the things about analysis part, uh, but it won't be as fun to do that without your data. Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
So, but this will get you started. This will make you feel more comfortable using Fiji and exploring some of the plugins and be more adventurous. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So I'll stick to basic operations, and this is very impromptu, informal. If you have any other questions when I go through different plugins on Fiji, do let me know. Okay.
Okay.
So uh, when it comes to Fiji, first let's talk about a couple of different features of the images. Right, images are nothing else but pixels. And when you look at any image and you zoom in to an image, you see pixelation happening. And let's say if your image dimensions are 512 by 512, you have 512 pixels vertically, you have 512 pixels horizontal. If you have your image dimensions, which are 1024 by 1024, you've got 1024 pixels horizontally and 1024 pixels vertically, right? And each of those pixels has some kind of a number, right? And that's a pixel
Hmm.
value. And that pixel value depends on the bit depth of the image. So typically on a camera system, camera-based system, which is what an apophorescence microscope has, the bit depths will be 16 bits. And what each bit means is 2 to the power of n, okay? So 2 to the power of 16 is 65,500. And one bit essentially equals to 2. So, and a bit means, it refers to a shade of gray, okay? So how many shades of gray do you have within the pixel? And
Hmm.
that is referred to as the intensity of the pixel. And when we sum all of that together, it's the intensity of the image that we are looking at. So something which is 2-bit has got 4 shades of gray, 2 to the power of 2. Something which is 3 bits has got 8 shades of gray, 2 to the power of 3, okay, and so on.
Okay.
Um, when you look at a confocal image, it's either 8 or 12-bit, and 12 bits are 4095. Okay, so about 4,000 bits of grays for a 12-bit image. So once we keep this in mind, we can start to understand why do we need to do sort of analysis. We need to do analysis because our eyes probably cannot see more than 5 bits of grays. I mean, probably if it's a 6-bit, you might be. But honestly, with this 256, I don't know if I can differentiate between every single shade of gray. Okay.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that's where uh, quantification of data comes into picture. But before we go that route of quantification, we need to understand how to use Fiji to do basic operations. Okay, so that's where Fiji comes into picture, or use any kind of a tool which can allow us to do basic operations and measure the intensity of an image. And that's where Fiji comes into picture. And Fiji stands for uh, Fiji is just ImageJ. That's essentially what it stands for. And part of the reason why this name comes from is historically there are different iterations of Fiji. Fiji started as ImageJ 1, ImageJ 2. And then what happened is everybody was preparing their own plugins, and you will try to go and get a plugin from here, a plugin from there. Um, and things got so crazy that people started having forums, people said that, all right, we need to have a common ground where everybody can deposit their material and things are easy to access. And that's where Fiji comes into picture, which is it comes as a package with all the bells and whistles in it. So come to
Mm.
think of it like this, that the backbone of Fiji is like your coffee maker. And if you, let's say, you want to drink French vanilla coffee, you will put a pod in the coffee maker and you will get a French vanilla coffee. Okay. So similarly with Fiji, or ImageJ is just a backbone. Now, if you want to do certain image operation, let's say open an image, you need a coffee pod which says open an image. So that's a plugin. That's a code. That's a macro. If you want to change the color of the image, essentially, which is a lookup table, each lookup table is its own coffee pod that you put into the backbone of ImageJ, right?
Mhm.
So essentially, you will be drinking a lot of coffee while you are using Fiji, if you go with the analogy of coffee pot on a coffee maker. And it's all free, right? So, which is a good thing. So, when we look at the main window of Fiji, you will find few things. There is a menu bar at the top, and we will be exploring each of this once I jump onto Fiji. There are a bunch of tools over here, and there is a status window. Okay, and everything that you will see in Fiji has its own purpose, has its own use. So nothing over here is just because they want to, just because developers want to throw things over there for you. Okay, everything is very useful, and most importantly, there is a search bar over here, which once you get used to the terms and the plugins that you want to use more frequently, you will start using the search bar. You will always, I would say, use a search bar versus clicking on the menu bars and then manually going and pulling something out. That's because after a while, your hands will start to hurt with all that clicking and moving the mouse around. Okay,
Mhm.
so knowing what operation you want to do is very helpful, because you can just type that in over here and run that plugin by itself. All
Mhm.
right. Okay. So some of the housekeeping things that I will go over first, even before opening an image, because it's important to know where few of these things lie. So for example, plugins and installing more of the plugins, types of the images that Fiji can open. One of the good thing about Fiji is that it has got bioformats importer, and hence Fiji can open any kind of image format that is part of any microscope system, right? So if you have an image which is part of Nikon, it's ND2. If you have image which comes out from Zeiss, it's CZI. If you have something from Leica, um, it's I would say, I don't remember what's the format of Leica. I think .liff most. But anyways, the point being, Fiji can open any damn image which is part of the various microscopy vendors, and give it to you. Okay, so the good part about Fiji also is that whatever metadata which is associated with those images can also be read by Fiji using the bioformats importer. Okay, so
Okay.
early on you had to um, install the bioformats importer and then use that to open. And now with Fiji, everything is so seamless that you can drag your image into the Fiji toolbar, um, and it brings up the bioformat importer. Fiji knows that you are opening up an image which is part of some other microscopy platform, and boom, it opens up right away. Okay, and
Right.
it can preserve, it can read that metadata. So for example, if you want to put your scale into the image, you can read that. And Fiji also has a ton of sample images. So if you want to play with some of their sample images, they have plenty of sample images to play with. All right. So let's go through some of these things first. So I'll fire up my Fiji right here. And even before I fire this up, your Fiji should be stored in your one of the drives that you have. All right. So I have my Fiji, which is stored in my folder. And if you look at the Fiji.app, it has a structure which looks like this. It has got ImageJ Windows 64-bit version, which is what I'm clicking on, which brings me up to this window, right? But beyond that, it has got a bunch of folders on which Fiji relies on. So it has got contents folder, it has got this images folder, right? It has got a bunch of Java files. And this is where the magic happens. It has got the plugins folder, all right? And these are .jar files. And if I click on one of these jar files, just want a notepad. Well, that doesn't look very good. I can open this jar file on Fiji, and you will see it's just a code. I don't want to save this as something else. All right, I will macros. So I can go to plugins since I want to run this. Plugins, macros. All right, that's because I don't have an image open. That's why it's behaving that way. Let's open the favorite image of everybody. All right, so this one just ran the macro. It did not open up. Startup macros. All right. So for example, it's nothing else but a little bit of code over here. Okay, that is executing for you. That's what I wanted to essentially talk about. So all the plugins are a bunch of codes which does mathematic operation on the image. Okay, and if you are interested in learning more, that's part of a computer vision science course. So if you get too much into this, you can take one of the courses from Georgia Tech on vision sciences, and go on with that. All right, but I will skip all that hardcore stuff. But let's go back to again demonstrate the point, which is that Fiji has a bunch of folders, and this one relies on all of this. Okay, so now when we are opening Fiji for the first time, it does a bit of background check and tells you that that's interesting. I did not do anything this time. That it's not up to date, and would I like to check my Fiji and make sure it's up to date? Okay, so to do that, first thing is to go to Window, actually Help, and Update. All right, so there are two things over here. One is updating Fiji, and second is updating ImageJ by itself, right? So as I told you, ImageJ is the backbone. It's a coffee maker part, and Fiji are all these plugins which are part of ImageJ. So if I click on update ImageJ, it's going to tell me what version of ImageJ I'm running on. So there are a lot of versions. They continuously update the backbone of Fiji, which is the ImageJ, if people report any kind of bug on the forums, and I'll talk to you more about the forums on which you can talk to people, uh, and tell them what's going wrong, what's going right, and they will change some of the codes in the Fiji to make sure, or in the ImageJ to make sure everything is looking hunky-dory and fine, okay? So I can say this is the latest version that they have, and I can upgrade to that. You can go to the daily build, you can go to the previous version, and so on, all right? So that's ImageJ, so it tells me right now I'm on version 1.53c, which is nowhere to be seen over here. But I can always go back to which version I'm using and so on. So I'm going to skip the update right now, but that's for you to know. And the second, again, you go down from the help menu and say, I want to update. And this is where it's going to update all the plugins which are part of Fiji. Okay. And it will also, right? So it brought up this dialog box which says that there has been an update from the developer for all these plugins. Do I want to update them, right? So from the time that I installed any of them, the developers have changed or tweaked some code over here. Okay, so they want to do that, and I would say sure, fine by me. So I'm going to apply the changes, and if you really want those changes to be applied, you have to restart Fiji. Okay. There is one more thing I want to show to you before I start my restart Fiji. Well, it will make me restart. So let me just restart it. And it's really straightforward. So let's go there. So let's go and look at a few other things. Okay, so it says it's up to date, but I'll go to advanced mode. Actually, manage update sites. I'm sorry, let me go back. So I'll go and click on manage update sites. And this is where people, those who are developing their own plugins, they put list of plugins at different places, right? So for example, when I say update Fiji, it also automatically updates ImageJ, right? Because one of the dependency I have is ImageJ Fiji. And then these are the plugins that people have put on the Fiji backbone. So let's say if you want to do some machine learning, right? I can use Elastic to do some machine learning, so I have that installed. If I want to quantify my cells and track cells, I can install this plugin called Mammoth, and so on. So if I want to, now let's just install this Noisy. I won't be using it, but I did not see that it was there before. So that's there. Actually, let's also install the new bias plugin, because new bias is a group of bio image analysis folks in Europe, and they have a bunch of plugins which they use in their course. So if you just want to go and follow along with their courses, you can install the new bias plugin. So let me do that and say close and apply changes, right? So it's going to update everything really fast. I'm going to close ImageJ, and if I restart, and now if I go to plugins, I should be able to see something which says new bias somewhere. Right, so I got Mastodon here, Elastic here. And if I don't see new bias, what I can do is just type new bias, and it takes me over here, run. Well, it just takes me to their website. It doesn't take me anywhere else. That's not what I was looking for. All right, so that's interesting. Typically, I should be able to see new BIOS, but it's not there. I'll look into that later. But um, at least I see Mastodon over here. I downloaded Noisy, so we see Noisy over here. I downloaded Elastic, so I have Elastic over here, and so on. Okay. The other way to install a plugin is manually installing a plugin. So you can um, plugins, go all the way up, and
Oh,
install
geez, you have so
plugins.
many.
There are a lot of. So once you start using, you you tend to go crazy. Um, so and many of so when you install Fiji, a lot of these plugins really come along with it. It's not that I've installed some of them. Some of them
Gotcha. Okay.
I have installed some of them. For example, Stardust, right? So I have installed that. Stitching is something that actually that came along with that. So I will not take credit for that. Everything that you see down here, these are the ones that have been installed by me, which were not part of Fiji. So again, it helps for you to remember some of these functions, because then you can simply go and type in over here. Let's say if I've got image and I want to concatenate image, right? So it tells you what you want to do, and you can just say run. The other way, I mean, there are no images open. That's why it's saying that. The other way to really just go over there is to press the command L. So if I press L, it directly takes me right here. Okay, so you will see your cursor blinking if I press L. All right. So there are a lot of shortcuts which I will keep on telling you, which are very helpful. And after a while, it's really annoying to kind of, click on something and then do this versus just saying, this is I want to do. So the other command, which is very helpful, so let's stick to this instead of going random. All right. So install plugin. So you say install plugin, and typically it should open up a window which should ask me where is, that's odd. So if it does not do that, what you can do is you can open your original file. Your Fiji app, open the plugins window or plugins folder, and directly dump the plugin right here. Okay, so that's one way of getting the plugin into the plugins folder. All right. The other thing is your Fiji runs on your memory, which is random access memory. It doesn't run based on your hard drive capacity. It uses your RAM. So the first time you install Fiji, and you also should know what is the memory on your computer, and you can assign certain percentage of the memory to Fiji. So for example, you can go to edit, options, and memory and threads. Okay, so I have 16 GB of RAM, and I've assigned about 14 GB to Fiji. What this means is Fiji will be able to handle operations which consume memory of up to 14 GB. All right. So let's say, for example, you have 8 GB of RAM on your computer, and you are trying to open an image which is about 4 GB. And once you open the 4 GB image, there should not be a problem with that. But the problem that will lie is if you are trying to do any kind of operations on the image, it requires some more memory to do operations on a 4 GB image. So that's where you will get some kind of an error message which says that there isn't enough memory left. All right. So if you have an 8 GB of memory, That's good enough to do very small operations. But if you want to open big stacks of images, it's a problem. Okay, so just keep that in mind. And once you increase the memory, you have to restart Fiji so that the memory now gets restored. The new memory that you have assigned gets applied um, to Fiji. Okay. Uh, the other way of looking at how much memory that you are using, you can go to plugins, go to utilities, go to monitor memory. So I love this. Let's say, for example, if I want to open a giant image file, this will show you how much of memory I'm consuming. So I have got some big files over here. Let me check. What is that's 1.41 GB. Okay, so this is about 2 GB in size, okay? And if I was to open this image, there are different ways of opening an image, right? So you can either do file, open, and tell Fiji where the image is and open. The easiest way is to just drag it on the toolbar, and that's it. So that opens up this window, which is the Bioformats import options window. And because it's a large file, I have checked the virtual stack, which will make sure that it's not using crazy amount of memory. Uh, the first thing over here is stack viewing. And there are different options with Stack, whether you want to view that as a data browser, as FID, as Hyperstack, and so on. So I'm going to click Hyperstack. And what that means is it's going to open the file in a certain stack order, which is by default, which is X and Y. That's essentially how your image is, which is X and Y. Then it's going to look at C, which is channels. So if you have multiple channels in your image, there will be a little slider which can be used to change your channels. Below that, if you have a Z stack, there will be one more slider below the channels bar, which will allow you to change the Z stack. And below that, you can have one more slider bar, which, let's say if you have a time-lapse data, you can also scroll through the time, okay? So that's essentially the organization of how your image is going to be. Now, during this, if I want to split my images into separate windows, I can do that too, okay? So let's just keep it the way it is right now and see what happens. And I have got 5 different uh, series options or 5 different layers. And I'm gonna just open this largest layer. And you can already see that the memory is just going crazy. It's just trying to read what's happening. And already I am using about 5% of the memory, right? So I'm gonna select this. And now it's ramping up the use of the memory. And it's gonna open image at some point. So, all right, so it used up to 1.5 GB of memory. And that's because the file size is 1.5 GB. Okay. So this is, again, a good point to look at what's part of the image, right? So if we go back, it says 1/5, and this is how things were organized. So if I go back, I mean, I cannot go back to the Bioformats importer, but it said X, Y, and C, right? So right now we are looking at different channels. And let me just adjust the brightness contrast. And I will come back to brightness contrast tool real quick. All right. So what essentially this means is we have got 5 channels over here. And depending on what channel I am, it's going to display that channel, okay? So let's say if I'm on channel number 1, it's going to display the first channel. which is my transmitted light image, okay, and so on. It's showing you the dimensions of your image. So this dimension is in pixels, and this dimension, let me just turn on the annotation tool, okay. So this dimensions are in pixels, and this dimensions are based on the actual metadata associated with the image, and it tells you how big your image is in microns. So if your metadata, which is associated with the image, is incorrect, this value can be wrong, but the pixel values will never be wrong, okay? So, and when it says we have got 10,000 to 25 pixels, uh, in X direction, well, this has to be, yeah, in X directions and 16,000 in Y directions, that's what we are having. And if I zoom in, so you can zoom in and zoom out. On your keyboard, you can use minus or plus buttons to zoom in and zoom out. Alternately, you also have the zoom magnifying glass over here, but it tells you use plus or minus keys, okay? So you can remember that, and you can zoom in or out of the images. And this is transmitted light, which is not very exciting to see. So I'll go to second channel, and you can change the channels simply by using the scroll wheel of your mouse, or you can use the arrow key on your keyboard to shift between channels, okay? So that's another way of shifting between channels. And you will hear a lot of shortcuts that I'll talk about in order to access some of the features of Fiji. So let's go back. So I want to go back to my second channel, which I know is DAPI. Or not. Okay, right, so we are in DAPI, and then we can zoom in and zoom out a certain region of the tissue, of the image rather. And if you think about zooming in and zoom out, let's say if I want to specifically zoom in to this area, I can simply hover my cursor here, and when you zoom in, you will be automatically zooming in to that area, okay? If I hover my cursor right here, or the hand tool right here, I will be zooming in right in that area. All right.
Okay.
So that's a very nifty and a nice feature of Fiji, which lets you zoom in and zoom out depending on where your cursor is. Okay. So that's opening the image right away. And apart from that, it also displays a few of the other information, which is the bit depth of the image, which is 16 bit, and what is the size of the image, which is 1.5 GB. Okay, so this is all the information that you get right up on the image itself. So those were some of the housekeeping things. Actually, one more thing, the color selection, which I forgot. So let's say when I'm selecting something, it's giving me this yellow colored box, right? Now, if you want to change this box, you can change the color of that. You can make it look anything that you want to. So there are lots of tools over here, and the name itself should tell you something. If you want to change the fonts, right? So you can say, this is what I want my font to be by default. This is, if you want Arial, say Arial. If you want to change the size from 18 to something else, you can do that in the font menu. Let's go again to edit options. And let's say if you want to change the line width, the color, Okay, so right now it's telling you that the foreground is white, the background is black, and the selection is yellow. So that is a selection tool. If I want to change this to, let's say, magenta, which they call it pink. So, right, so now it's a pink colored. Actually, they used to have magenta. There we go, magenta. Right, so now it's magenta in color. Um, whatever pleases your eye. Sometimes what happens is when you start putting colors into your images, um, the actual tool gets hidden in the colors of the image.
Right.
So if you put a yellow color and you have a yellow outline, you cannot see it, right? So this will be much more helpful when you have uh, images with some colors in them. So until then, I will just stick with the default that I have, which is of yellow. Okay. And again, the whole point of going back and forth um, with this is so that you start to feel comfortable with some of these options which are available, and you know how to go and access the options that I'm seeing over here.
Right.
Okay. All right. And feel free to play with all of them. Okay. Just if you think that you're getting bored, just go open up Fiji, fire up Fiji, and start clicking and see what happens. Okay. And that's the best way of learning. I mean, the whole point right now is to make you feel comfortable, to help you cross that barrier. Once you
Right.
cross that barrier, you will feel comfortable by yourself. Okay.
Mhm.
So you need to tell me you are not comfortable for as long as you're not comfortable. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to close this image uh, and let's look at other things which I have on my list. So let's say we go through opening images now and walk through a bunch of options that we have over here. So let's just do, let me introduce you to some of the sample images that Fiji has in itself, right? So if you go to File, Open Samples, there are all the samples which come with Fiji pre-installed, all right? So let's say if you want to open a bunch of cell colonies or blobs, and blobs is one of the most loved image for anybody who teaches Fiji, so I'll stick to that. So we opened a blob image, okay? And also open something else to go along with that. Let's say I want to open fluorescent cells, okay? So now we have fluorescent cells over here. So with the blob image in mind, and again, both of them are 8-bit, and I want to show you something which is higher in bit depth, I'll just open one of my image because I know it's definitely higher in bit depth. Okay, so let me just open one of my image. I'm gonna crop it out. So and it's not that you need to open the memory all the time. This is for you to understand what's really happening in the background. So I'll crop a tiny bit of the area over here. All right. So this is enough to play with few of the things I want to. And this is for you to also appreciate when we open one versus the other. And I will just open one of the images and I'll talk about everything I'm doing over here. Okay. So don't feel that I'm rushing through things. I'll discuss every single step that I'm doing. Actually, let's open the nucleus channel because that should be much more intuitive since the other is also a nucleus channel. All right. And let's close this to you guys. All right. So the first thing when we look at these two individual images, I want you to focus on the bit depth. So this is a 16-bit image, and this is an 8-bit image. Okay. So if we go back to our chart where pixels have values, what you will see is if an image is 8-bit, the dynamic range of an image within the histogram is from 0 to 256. Okay. And if your image is 16-bit, it's up to 65,500. So the first thing that we will do is try to understand how these values change. And to look at that, we'll open something called the histogram, image histogram. So let's go back to the window over here. And because I know I want to look at the histogram, I'll just say histogram, right? So I start to type histo, and it presents to me different options. And it says the histogram plugin is present under analyze histogram, right? So let's also do that. Analyze, and it should be here, which is histogram, right? And a shortcut for that is Control H, okay? So when you know what you want to do and you keep on reading the information on Fiji, you know that, all right, if I just want to look at the histogram of my image, I can just press Control H and I can be done, okay?
Right.
So let's do that. So I'll just go and click Control H, and boom, right away, I see a histogram for this image. And if I go to log scale, now you know what is the min and max intensity of our image, okay? So having said that, what I'll do is I'll also open something called the brightness contrast window, okay? So this might be a lot of words for you. So let's do what I did earlier. Instead of typing something in this time, I want to expose you to different tools over here, which are under the image, and these are extremely helpful for basic image operations, okay? So everything that we have over here is what you will be accessing quite a bit for basic image operations, all right? So go under image, type, image adjust, brightness contrast, okay? So if I click this, we get this tool. And it also said the shortcut for brightness contrast is Shift Control C, okay? And I kid you not, this is very, very helpful, okay? You will be using this shortcut way too many times than you can think of, all right? So I'm gonna close this and do Shift, Control, and C, which brings up the brightness contrast, okay? Now I'll go back and click on this image, and it says 83 to 3904. That's what the brightness contrast is set to. But then when I reset this, all right, so let's say if this is how it's looking like, and if I go and reset, it gives you the minimum value and the maximum pixel intensity value. So remember, it's a 16-bit image, right? So our scale can extend from 0 all the way to 65,500. So I can go back and set this to 65,500. And what's going to happen? What do you think what will happen?
It'll get much more intense. The range will be greater, right?
Let's do it. Come on. So right now it's automatic, but let me just go and do this. I don't see much, right?
Huh. Okay.
Because as we stretch this out, things get dimmer, right? So if you now look at the image histogram, so essentially what you have, everything in the image is between 0 to about 11,000, right? So from here till here, well, here till
I see. Okay.
here, right? So what we are doing with brightness contrast is we are decreasing our maxima to display the pixels which are right in this range to be displayed better. We are ignoring all the pixels which are in this range, right? So we are completely ignoring all of them. And
Right.
now we are saying I'm going to look at everything which is between 0 to 11,000. Make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. So the image histogram tool, the brightness contrast tool, really gives you information on the numbers or the actual pixel values which are part of your image. All right. So let me clear all of this. And one of the ways to, in fact, look at the value of each of the pixel is by hovering your cursor on to the pixel, right? And this is where the good lesson comes into picture, which is the scale always goes from black to white. Okay, so blacks will be 0, whites will have increasing values associated with them. So let me zoom in on one of the pixels. All right, so I've zoomed into one of the pixels over here. And if I go back and click on the rectangle menu, I'll again get this pointer, which will let me see my values now, right? So it shows that this is about 5,000. And if I go on the outer edge of the cell, which is all black, the values decrease, okay? And the other thing with the brightness contrast is when I'm changing my minima, this is looking brighter to you, right? But even if this is getting brighter, if you keep on, where is that? Okay, it's right over there. Okay. Even if it keeps on brighter, if you just focus right here, the pixel intensity value doesn't change. It says 4281, right? And if I increase this, it's still 4281. Okay. So the message, the take-home message is, by changing brightness contrast, you are not changing the pixel intensity value. Okay.
Right. Okay.
Now that will only change if I was to go here and say, and let's say set it and apply and change the dynamic range of the image there, then I'm changing it permanently. Okay.
Right.
But just by playing with brightness contrast, it's helping you to see those pixels which are hiding right here, or maximizing the appearance of the pixels from this entire dynamic range. Okay. All right. So I think I've beaten the brightness contrast down to death.
So I have a question actually. So you've been selecting like areas on an image. Is there a way to select the same area on the image for a different image, like the same like square size? Because you've been drawing it by hand.
Yes, so I will come to that. And
okay.
Yeah, so there is a way of saving the ROI on the image and making sure the same ROI can be opened on the other image. And the question you raise is very important, because that's part of data reproducibility, right? Because if you want to reproduce the same ROI from a big image that you have, how can you be sure that I'm looking at the same ROI every time I go over there? Okay,
Right.
So I'll talk about the ROI and how to save those things.
Okay.
All right. So one last thing I want to talk about in terms of in relations to pixel values is a line histogram. Okay. So let's say if so line profile, plot profile. All right, so analyze plot profile. I hope it's Command K. Okay. So the option, the shortcut is Control K,
Okay.
and that's under Analyze, histogram, and plot profile. They are both side by side. And what you will realize by now is some of the most often used commands have a shortcut associated with them. Okay,
Mhm.
so anytime you go into the Fiji menu and you see that by default there is a shortcut associated with that, it means that it's a most often used command.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll do a plot profile, and it tells me I need to have a line or a rectangular selection. Wonderful, right? So that brings us to some of the other tools which are right here, right? So let's talk about the tools now, something that I did not talk till now. So when we look at the tools on Fiji, um, I was showing you a bunch of rectangles, right? So you can see there is a small arrow next to each of them, which means there are more options associated. And if I right click, it says I can have a rounded rectangle. So instead of a rectangle, I have a rounded rectangle. If I right click, it says rotated rectangle. So you can um, select an area and you can flip around. If your image, it's not straight, and you want to select an area which is not fitting into a certain dimensions that you have, right? So
Right.
you can rotate your rectangle the way you want to. So that's that. Let's go back to rectangle. Then if you select a round tool, there are different options over here for the oval selections. But right now we are interested in a line tool. So I'll click on the line. But if I right click on the line, there are other options of segmented line, free line, and arrow tool. I'll talk about arrow tool in a bit. So if you go to straight line, and I draw a line over here, and I do plot profile, by now the shortcut is Control K. And as it turns out, if I just press K, that also works. Okay, so you don't need to press Control. You can just press K. And what it's telling you is it's starting from here till here. Your y-axis shows you the pixel intensity values. And this makes sense, right? Because we are going from here till here.
Mm.
There is an increase in intensity right here, and that's about 10,000. And as we cross that, there is a dip right here, which is represented over here. And then there is again an increase, which is represented here. And then we go out, and again, we are somewhere in the range of about, whatever this is, which is 87. Okay. So that's plot profile. This can be very helpful, and you can click live, and you can go across, and it changes by itself depending on wherever you are going, right?
Uh-huh.
So real quick, when you are doing some mathematical operations to know how much is your background signal, how much is your actual signal from the point or object of interest, right? The plot profile tool is very helpful. Okay. You can also display this as data. You can save all of this plot. You can list this, and you can save this values by copying and pasting. You can save this as a CSV file, and so on. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So that's that. We also talked about brightness contrast. So let's talk about the lookup tables, right? So one thing is all the images that you will ever acquire, except for that weird thing on Kians, everything by default is grayscale value. Okay. Now,
Right.
if you want to change the grayscale, you can go to lookup table. All right. And these are all the lookup tables that are available to you. So you can say, I want to have a fire lookup table, right? So it will give you a fire lookup table. If you want to have a red lookup table, it gives you red. So you can literally overlay any darn thing on the image that pleases you. Okay. So that's pretty much lookup table. And if you want to just get an idea of how different lookup tables will look like, so I go to lookup table over here. Well, that's not the option. Color, let's say show lookup tables. I think it's display lookup tables. Okay. So if you go to display lookup tables, these are all the lookup tables available to you. Okay. So if we have a cyan lookup table, it goes from, so instead of thinking it to be shades of gray now, think of it to be shades of cyan, right? So if you look at shades of grays, you go from black to white. When you think of shades of cyan, you go from 0 to the brightest cyan color that you can get. Okay. So versus if you have something, let's say like 16 color, so it's going to have different colors there. You have a spectrum lookup table. In that scenario, you will go all the way from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum. Okay.
Is
So
this
you
how people
can,
do like heat maps?
so the
Is this
thing
how
with,
people make? Go ahead.
you can make heat maps. So for example, and I'll talk about that. If you, let's say if you have a Z stack, okay.
Mhm.
In the Z stack, you are making a composite image. And I'll demonstrate all these things. And when you make a composite image, you want to show the depth as a heat map projection.
Mhm.
So you can say that, okay, all right, the stack, which is all the way at the bottom, has got this color, whereas the stack, which is all the way on the top, has got this color. So you can assign a spectrum kind of a display table to the entire Z stack. Okay.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah. I mean, even right now, we can go and say this is spectrum, right? So where this can be helpful is visually, you can get an idea of what kind of a value is associated with any of the pixel. Okay. So let's say if I do shift control C, now it's changing to something like this. But if it's 0 to 7187, we know that something which is 7187 should be solid red versus something which is outside is 0. So let's say if I can change this and change the display table. Okay. So this is more of a visual thing to tell people, all right. And then if I have a heat map kind of thing over here, it's very easy to know what is the value. Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right. So let's go to, in this way, you appear as if you're doing something very fancy. In reality, you are not, you're doing nothing
Yeah.
fancy, right? So when you kind of learn the nitty-gritty of these things, you are like, damn, people have been fooling me all my life and I've been impressed by them.
Right.
All right. So let's look a bit more modest now. A few of the other things, cropping and duplicating an image, right? So let's say if you have, uh, this is not a giant image, but the image I opened was giant and I was doing things which I did not tell you what I was doing, but now I can tell you what I was doing. One of the easiest way to copy some, wouldn't say copy, but to crop is to duplicate. I have stopped using the crop command. There is a crop command. I think it's hiding somewhere. All right, let me see. Okay, so it's asking me that I need to have an area selected before I can even use a crop command. So let's go and select an area to begin with. So let's say I've selected this, okay? And I do crop. And sometimes what happens is I don't remember where to go and find crop command because I'm so used to typing things here now. Okay, so I can go into image, and the crop is somewhere right here, and the shortcut is Control Shift X. So if I say crop, oops, it cropped the image, and the problem now is the original image is gone. Okay, unless you have saved it, it's a different story. But I did not save my original image, so it's gone. Okay, so let me go back and make it big. Of course, I don't want to save it. Let me open this again. I'll open a smaller one so that it's a bit faster. All right, so this is where if I crop, I lose this. But what I like to do is rather use the duplicate command, which is Shift Control D. So now it's asking me what do I want to duplicate, and I can name the new image right here. Okay, it's asking me, do I want to duplicate the hyperstack, and it's asking me what channels I want to select. Okay, so I know my channel is number 2, so I'll just say channel number 2 and say okay. And in that way, it's only duplicating this area. It's sparing my original image. It's not doing anything over here. And I get this image right here. Okay. So I never use crop. I always use duplicate. And that way it's very helpful with everything that you do. Okay. So again, this is the images that I have with me. Let's play with some of the images which are part of the sample image data sets that comes along with Fiji, right? So I'll close this one. Let's go back, file, open samples, and let's say I want to open my HeLa cells. I believe those were they. So that's a different one. And this is something you will see at times. I opened the image, and guess what happened? I did not see anything, right? And that's because I ended up setting this to 16-bit range. So I'll go back and set that to automatic so that, let's say if I open this image again, file, open samples, HeLa cells, now I see the color, okay? Because what it did before was it automatically went and set the dynamic range from 0 to 65,000. In reality, sometimes you will not be filling up the entire dynamic range that is available to you, okay? So you just want to display, you just want to go and say, open with the dynamic range, which is best suited automatically, okay? And now you see the image. But just in case, if sometimes you don't see the image, let me go back and say 16-bit, then you have to Shift Control C and reduce your minima, and now you see the image. Okay. So this will happen at times with you where somebody sends you an image and you cannot see things. That's not because there is nothing in the image. That it's just because the display is different. Okay. So I can just click auto, go to the next image, and again I'm using my arrow keys on the keyboard to shift between images and just say auto. Okay. It's been stubborn, so I'll just go and say automatic to make the life easy. Okay, and now it's fine. It only changed the first one, not the second and the third one. And you can appreciate that most of our values for the green channel are right here, right? If we go to red, if I go to blue, most of my blues are right here. So that's that. Actually, I forgot what I was supposed to say, and I think digressing at random that I'm doing. Okay, so lookup tables, cropping, duplicating, saving an image. All right. I'm going ahead directly to this one now. So the point we are stuck at right now is the first one, which is switching between channels using the channels tool. Okay, so that's where I will be going now, which is using the channels tool. So right now, as you are seeing, I'm moving my arrow key. Well, you cannot see, but I'm moving my arrow keys, but my image is not changing, right? But you can see something in the brightness contrast table that this is also changing. So what do? I do Shift Control Z, which is my channels tool. Okay, and again, you will use this a lot with multicolor images, and that's image, adjust, image colors, channels tool, Shift Control and Z. Okay, so I have to change this composite image to color image. And once I'm at color image, now I can change things, make this auto, and now we have all the images getting displayed. Okay?
Right.
Um, the other thing is, let's say if I go back to composite image, I can see all three channels together. You can decide which channel you want to see and which channel you do not want to see. Okay? However, if I want to change the intensity of one or the other channels, you have to be very careful that you are looking at the right channel. So right now, the first channel is red, and I'm adjusting something for red. Right now, I'm adjusting something for green. This becomes very easy. Let's say if you are just using color, then whichever channel you are looking at is what is getting changed. Okay. So there are different ways of scaling the cat over here. You just need to be aware of what you are doing. Okay. So again, just to rehash this, you can go to composite. Um, if my reds are too dark, I can change that. If my greens are really saturated, I mean, they're not saturated in real, but in terms of display sense, they're saturated. And my blues were super bright, so I'm making them reasonably bright. Okay. All right. So again, let's say if I want to pick one of the cells and save one of the cell, I will use the rectangle tool, selecting my rectangle tool, right-clicking on that, duplicating that. It's asking me what channels I want, and I say, I want 3 channels. I said, okay, and I got 3 channels. All right. I can save this file, save as TIFF, and you can save it in an appropriate folder on your desktop or anywhere you feel like saving it. Let's say I'll say Gila cells crop. Let me go to my desktop and save it. So now, even if I close this, I can drag and drop it to Fiji and I get my image, which is Gila cells cropped. Okay. Now, let's say you are here and you know that the sequence of your images is something that looks like a lysosome, mitochondria, and DAPI, your nucleus. Typically, I'm used to always keeping my nucleus first, then my other channels. That's my convention. So what if you want to change the order of your channels? Okay, so you can go to image, color, and you can go to arrange channels. Okay, and there you can say, I want the order to be 3, 2, and 1, right? So 3, 1, and 2, 3, 1, and 2, and now you get your nucleus, lysosomes and your mitochondria in that
Very nice.
order. Okay, so this is very helpful when you want to wiggle around some of the things. All right. I mean, till you don't know something like this, you'll be like, oh, how do I do it, right? And you can also split
Right.
your channels. So you get this individual channels. You can also put this individual channels together, which is called merge channels. You can then go to image, colors, and merge the channels. Okay. So now you can decide which channel you want first and the second. And you have to be careful in terms of how they are named. All right. So I can put the channels the way I want to. So I'll keep them this way and say, okay, and I get this images, right? So let's do this again, all right? Image, color, split channels. I split them up. Let's go here. Image, color, merge them. So let's say if I make this channel 3, channel 2, channel 1, all right? And also keep the source images just because. Okay. So if you uncheck keep the source images, they all will be closed once you merge them. So I'll say okay, and I get my images, right, the way they are. Cool?
Yeah.
All right. So that's enough of some of the color options that you have. And again, I really encourage you to play with some of these options, but typically you will be using this options. You will be using more of this for options than anything else. Okay. So let's see what else I have on my list. All right. So we switched between channels. We looked at the lookup tables. Now again, um, the field has really moved on from using lookup tables, which are not colorblind friendly. Okay. So when you put the images together, I strongly encourage you to use colorblind friendly palettes. So instead of using red, I would say use something like magenta, because people who are colorblind can look at magenta color. Okay. So there are some options over here uh, which automatically replaces red with magenta. So if I put red with magenta, so let's, so this is a good point to talk about where we are. So if you still look at some of the information for this images, we are still looking at 16-bit image, right? These are all individual images, okay? So what if we want to save them as a merged image the way, when you use scans, it opens as an RGB image with, red, green, and blue, right? So we can change the type of this image to RGB color, okay? And now it's just one image. So let me save this so you can understand that. All right, I'm gonna close both of them. And if I uh, click this RGB image, a single image opened. There are no multiple channels that I see, right? But when I open this TIFF file, which is not an RGB stack, I still have options of changing brightness contrast for each of the channels, right? Which I do not have the luxury in the RGB image, unless I go to stacks and say color, and it will convert the image to individual channels. Okay.
Okay.
So typically, when you want to save things for presentations or for journals, when you are submitting a paper, I would say convert that to an RGB image. Okay.
Okay.
But let's go back and talk to talk about the original point that we started with, which is converting reds to magenta, which is colorblind friendly. So I'll replace red with magenta, and boom, right away we get magenta. One of the other thing it really mentioned over here is how would a colorblind person see this, right? I mean, you and I are fine, we can see this, but what about somebody who is colorblind? Okay, so simulate color blindness. There are a bunch of modes. Let's just do normal mode. So different people have different issues. So let's just do something over here. This is what a person with a certain condition will look at the image, you know? So though it is like this, when they look at it, it will look something like this.
Right.
Okay. So that's where using magenta is really important. All right. Okay. So save that. That's good. And all of this is good. All right. That is the wonderful part of opening a 3D image. So let's open the big image that I kind of gave to you to play with. So I'm gonna open this one. It's an ND2 file, right? It's not a typical TIFF file, it's an ND2 file. The other thing that you can also do with the ND2 files is look at the metadata, okay, which comes associated with the file, which tells you what kind of objective I used, what was my laser power, what was my high voltage values, and so on. If it's a camera-based system, it will have information on the percent of light which is passing through, will have information on the exposure of the camera, and so on. So let's display the metadata. All right, so here's what it's telling me completely. There are a lot of values, right? So let's say it's telling me that it's a 512 by 512 image. It's telling me how the dimensions are ordered. It's a 12-bit image, right? So I can expect values to go from 0 to 4095. What kind of, what was the step size when I did my Z? So it says it's 0.1 micrometer. It tells me about different channels that I have, and what was the channel name associated. What was the laser power I used? What was the high voltage I used for each of the PMT? And these are really important values when you want to make sure or replicate the image in the same way, okay? So that is part of the acquisition though. So never mind. So these are all the values you get. And again, these are important because if somebody tells you, oh, how can you be sure that you use the same acquisition settings when you acquired the images, right? So I'm like, you know what? I can show the metadata because metadata won't lie, okay? So
Is
that's
this
the
something
power
we
of the,
can load into the microscope?
yes, you can. So if you are, let's say if you are using an ND2 file and you open this file on Nikon microscope, the Nikon microscope will give you an option saying reuse the same settings.
Okay.
Or if you don't get an option, you know what settings to use, right? Because I know that my laser power for channel 1 was 1, my high voltage was 129. I mean, these are the two important values, okay?
Okay.
For channel 2, my laser power was 2 and my high voltage was 80, right? So those are the two important values that you will play with. Other than that, everything is sort of by default, okay? So you can always go back to the metadata and reuse those settings, okay? All right. Let me again open this image so you appreciate this. All right. So it says the dimensions order are X, Y, channels, and Z stack, right? So till now, when we opened a bunch of images over here, we were only seeing the channels bar, right? We were not seeing one more, which is the Z. Now we are seeing the Z, right?
Right.
And again, it's showing you it's 16-bit, but in reality, it's not 16-bit. It's showing you it's 16-bit because of me, who has set this up. No, that's fine. So I'll say auto, and this will look good. And things are pretty terrible because I'm all the way at the bottom of my Z stack. So I'll reset and try to bring it up to some respectable level, right? So now I have different channels over here. I've got my first channel, which is this red channel. My green channel. My second is red channel. And my third channel is my transmitted light channel. Okay.
Okay.
So herein, I can make a composite image. So I can go to Shift, Control, and Z, do a composite. So now I can see all of them together, right?
Oh, that's cool.
So let's just look at one cell. So I'll duplicate this, right? And let's see, do we need all of them, right? Yeah, it's starting from bottom, it's going to the top. We don't get much till, let's say here, right? So this is 45. So I only want something up to 45 and not anything more than that, because after that, it's just useless, right? So I'll duplicate this, duplicate the hyperstack, and say I want something from 1 through 45, okay? And say okay. So it's opening one more image with the 3 channels and stacks going from 1 through 45. I'm going to zoom in, and clearly you can see that things are getting pixelated, right? Because again, the image was small, we cropped it, so it's expected for it to get pixelated. Again, it was a 512 by 512 image, and I should have really imaged this at 1024 by 1024. Okay. So anyways, let's go back and look at all of this, right? So we are seeing we have got beautiful cells. Now we want to look at sort of a 3D projection, right? So in the core, we have Imaris, which does a pretty cool 3D projections. But if you don't have Imaris, if you want to quickly look at something, you can use the stacks menu over here. Okay, and the stacks let you do a lot of things. If you don't want to go all the way here, there is a shortcut for stacks. You can click on stacks right here. And it lets you do many of the commonly used things, which is you can add a slice, delete a slice, you can move through slice, you can set a slice, and so on. Some of the commonly used functions with set a slice is Z projection, which is, let's just look at that. Z projection, where you can do average, you can do maximum intensity, minimum intensity, and so on. All right. So what does this mean, right? Average intensity means it will go through the Z stack and take and display the pixels which are an average of the voxels. So if you look from top to bottom, it's going to pick an average. It's going to create an average pixel intensity of all the pixels from top to bottom and display that. Okay. So let's just, the best way is to look at max and min. So let's do min intensity. Okay. And with minimum intensity, it's going to display the minimum intensity of the pixel from top to bottom. Okay. So would you expect something in the red and green channel with the minimum intensity?
Probably not, right?
Exactly. Most likely nothing, right? So if you look at the brightness contrast, and this is a nice place to look at the histograms, right? So I say yes. well, let's just do one channel instead of. All right, so if you look at the histogram of this channel, it's up to 56, right? So that's nothing. And even if we do log, it's really nothing. So let's do a max intensity projection. Okay, and now we are seeing everything. And if we look at the histogram for this, I say no, it's from 51 to the max, whatever it is. Okay, and the log scale. Okay, so I mean, clearly it was looking very pixelated. And if we zoom in and do composite, now we know which one is red, which one is together, and which one is not, right? So I like to display this as much. Let me go and change the lookup table of red to magenta, which when you are trying to do co-localization, magenta is easier than red because combination of green and magenta gives you white, which is more easier on the eye compared to trying to look for a yellow color.
Right.
Okay, so you can try to play with this by yourself. All right, so we got this right here. It's already 4 o'clock. Shoot. So we got this right here, and let's say one last thing I want to show to you. Do a 3D projection. Okay, so right here, and if I zoom in,
whoa.
All right, so we can look at the 3D volume of the entire cell. Okay, so this is a quick way of looking at things, and this is all free, nothing that is charged, and you can nicely show some of these things.
Right.
All right. And again, you can change the color and whatnot over here. Okay. And all of this can be saved. All right. So you can just go and file, save as, TIFF, and so on.
Okay.
Okay.
And I have one more question. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Go ahead with your question.
Oh, so I remember you saying that if we want to quantify, we have to save in the white grayscale, but all these images seem to be RGB.
So this is on an RGB image, right? So
right.
It will tell you if it's an RGB or not. For example, let's open the two HeLa cells, right? And a shortcut for closing one of the windows is W. So if you keep on clicking W, you will start closing this windows, okay?
Okay.
So if an image is RGB or not, will be displayed right here, right? So, so you know that this is an RGB image. This is, it just is a 16-bit image, right? So it's clearly, you have individual channels that you can control, and we can analyze each of the images, okay? Let me, I had an appointment with somebody at 4. I did not realize that time flew by so fast.
Oh, okay. Yeah, definitely go to that. We can schedule another one as well, just to when I have my specific data. I just wanted to know if I should save as, so I should save on the machine as 16-bit.
Right.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, by default, the way things are, it is at 16-bit, okay?
Oh, okay.
So
awesome.
Actually, it's fine. I think it should be okay. One question that you asked was about replicating data, saving as ROI, which I really want to show to you.
Oh,
so
yes,
let me
yes.
show that to you, because that is very important. All right, so let's say if I have a big image like this. Well, let me just close that and open one of this image over here. And now let me just duplicate and open the second one, which will be very easy to play with. All right, I have this. Now, I can rotate this. It's pretty annoying that okay. So let's say if I have this image with me and I want to know something that I've done in this area, right?
Mhm.
So I can say, I can click T as in Tom. And when I click T, it brings up this ROI manager. Okay.
Oh, okay.
And I can add as many things I want to over here, no matter what I'm doing. If you're measuring something manually or not, okay, I can put everything in the ROI manager. If I go through each of these ROIs, it specifically shows me where I am. And for each of these regions, if I want to, let's say, measure something, it gives me area, min, max, and whatnot. Okay. So all this measurements, numbers can be part of a different session where I can show you some of the measurements and analysis part.
Mhm.
But you can get all these values. Now it's also important to save each of this, right? So let's say you are done with what you are doing, and you want to come back to them again. Okay.
Right.
So you can select on all of the ROIs. I'm doing Control Shift and say more and save. Okay. So I'll just say
Okay.
ROI set and then close everything, right? So in future, if I want to come back to all these areas again, and I clearly saved my ROI file. Oh, it's right here. Okay. So what I'll do is, again, go and click T and go to more and say open, right? So I'm going to go and open my ROI set file. And now it's going to load all those ROIs that we had saved earlier. Come on. And we can go and visit each of them again.
Very cool.
Okay. So the ROI manager feature is extremely important for data reproducibility.
Yeah.
Especially, let's say in future when you acquire, or this is for anybody who has got larger data sets. Let's say if you are doing sectioning of spleen or a tissue that you get from an animal, right?
Mhm.
And you just go and do a tile and stitch image. And of course, you're not going to put the entire tile and stitch. You will select a small area, right? But how do you remember I'm selecting the same area, right?
Mhm.
And this is how it's very helpful. And the same thing is true. You can select this, and then you can duplicate the same area for a multi-channel image and whatnot, right? So this ROI feature really becomes very helpful at that kind of an area. So, also, let's say if you want to select the same size of the ROI for everything, right? You can look at the size of the ROI that you are doing, right? So right here, it will tell you what is the X and Y or the width and the height, right? But trying to get 180 by 150 all the time or using some of the other options is really painful, right? So if I just draw this and say, let me just delete all this, guys. So if I just say T, I can, let's say if I, by mistake, it got removed, I can bring this back and go and put the same size ROI somewhere else, same size ROI somewhere else. So every time I go somewhere else, it's the same size ROI that I'm getting.
Right. Okay. That's very neat.
So this can be very helpful in making sure that your image dimensions remain the same.
Right. Okay.
So one more thing I have, but I'll probably skip it in the interest of time. This is already too much for your brain to absorb. And that is about putting a scale bar but we will revisit the scale bar sometime later. How about that?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. So what I'll do is all the images that I played with, except for this brain image, you have access to it, and you don't need brain image for to do the things the way I was doing.
Right.
What you can do is you can open some of the images that you have, play with all the options that I talked about. I'll save this video, send it to you. You can go back and forth, look at that,
Yeah,
and reach out to me if you have any questions if you cannot perform a certain task. Okay.
that would be great. And am I able to send this to my lab members who weren't able to attend today?
Yeah, that's fine. You can send this to them.
Okay.
Yeah, that's totally fine.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, and I'll share the image I shared with you to all of them because it's part of my Microsoft Cloud. It is so I need to give them the permission to open. So I'll do
Oh,
that.
okay.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much. And then can I
You're
schedule
welcome.
another time with you to do actual measurements of data?
Absolutely, but again, it will be very helpful if you have your own data, so that you will feel much more personal about it.
Right,
I'll
right.
be
That's what
much
I'm,
more
yeah.
happy. Yeah, I'll be much more happy to do some of that with my data sets. But again, it's you will feel much more involved if there is data set which is coming from the question that you are trying to ask.
Right.
Okay, so let's aim for getting some data from your side, and then we can continue this.
Okay, sounds
Sounds
good.
good. All right,
This is
wonderful.
incredibly helpful. Thank you very much, Gaurav.
Well, I'm glad this will get you rolling, and you will feel more easy using Fiji than before.
Definitely, definitely.
And I'll do one more thing. I'll probably send you a request to kind of put a request for training, which I should have done that before, so that everything is cataloged on PPMS. That I trained you for this, so
Oh, yes,
I'll send
yes.
you a
Mhm.
request for that. Okay. All right.
Yeah, and do you
That
have our
should be
speed
it.
type and everything?
Yeah, I think I have your speed type and everything.
Okay, okay.
Okay.
Alrighty.
All right. Let me see if I can stop the recording. All right. This is. Uh, this is really where. Okay, got it. It was hiding.